Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Cabin of Horrors. Tonight, we're going back in time once again into the shadows of ancient Greece, Rome, and the haunting legacy of Norse mythology. Greek and Roman cultures, famed for their gods, monsters, and stories of fate, have laid the foundation for so many of the horror tropes that we know today. From vengeful spirits to monstrous beings that haunt our darkest dreams, their myths are filled with tales of fear, death, and the supernatural. Norse mythology, originating from the cold, unforgiving lands of Scandinavia, is a tapestry woven with monstrous beings, vengeful gods, and apocalyptic visions that resonate deeply with our darkest fears. From the death of gods to cosmic destruction, these ancient tales have profoundly shaped modern horror, echoing the timeless dread of the unknown. So gather around the fire as we explore the terrifying world of these ancient mythologies and how they still haunt us today. First, let's talk about the monsters, the terrifying creatures that lurk in the shadows of Greek and Roman mythology. These creatures often represented humanity's deepest fears, the fear of death, of being trapped, or of losing control. And they weren't just the stuff of legends. They embody the things that made the ancients tremble in the night. Let's begin with one of the most iconic of all, the Minotaur. Picture this, a half-man, half-bull creature trapped in the dark maze known as the labyrinth. This monster didn't roam freely. It was a prisoner of its own nature, a victim of anger and vengeance. Born from the cursed union of a bull and a Pasiphae, the wife of King Minos, the Minotaur's hunger for human flesh symbolizes the fear of being trapped by one's own monstrous desires and the terror of being hunted by an unstoppable force. The labyrinth itself, designed by the brilliant Daedalus, was so intricate that no one could escape. Once inside, death was all but certain. The Minotaur's terrifying presence was a reflection of the primal fear of being trapped in a place from which there is no escape. It's easy to see how this myth still lingers in our modern nightmares. Now let's move from the Minotaur to another iconic creature from Greek mythology, Medusa. Medusa wasn't always a monster. In fact, she was once a beautiful mortal woman. But after a violation in Athena's temple, she was cursed by the goddess herself, transformed into a horrific creature with snakes for hair and a gaze that can turn anyone into stone. The terror of Medusa lies not just in her appearance, but in the irrevocable nature of her curse. To gaze upon her was to invite death, sudden, terrifying, and irreversible. Medusa represents a terrifying paradox. The beautiful, the alluring, and the grotesque fused all into one. She's both a warning and a manifestation of the consequences of angering the gods. And while her curse may seem extreme, it reflects the ancient fear of transformation, of losing one's identity or humanity to forces beyond control. Moving on, we come to the Hydra, a creature that symbolizes a fear so primal, so inescapable, it's almost suffocating. The Hydra was a serpent-like creature with multiple heads that grew back twofold every time one was cut off. Imagine fighting a foe where every strike you land only seems to make it stronger. Hercules was actually tasked with killing the Hydra as part of his 12 labors. He faced this very terror, and every time he severed a head, 2 more would take its place. This myth represents the fear of facing an endless, multiplying threat, an enemy that grows no matter how much we try to fight back. And no discussion of monstrous beings would be complete without Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld. Cerberus is no ordinary beast. His role was to prevent the souls of the dead from escaping and to keep the living from entering the realm of the deceased. In many ways, Cerberus is the ultimate guardian of the boundary between life and death, a terrifying reminder of mortality's finality. Now let's take a step further into the darkness, to the very place where death itself reigns, the underworld. In Greek mythology, This realm wasn't a fiery hell, but a shadowy, gloomy domain ruled by Hades, the god of the dead. Unlike the Christian hell we think of today, the Greek underworld wasn't a place of torment for the wicked, but rather a place of despair, a reflection of the uncertainty and fear of what comes after death. The underworld, or Hades, was divided into different sections, each one a reflection of different fates. The fields of asphodel, for example, were where the indifferent souls resided, those who had led neither good nor bad lives. These souls wandered in an eternal, monotonous existence. The very idea of living forever, without purpose, without meaning, this is the true horror of the underworld. Then there was the river Styx, the boundary between life and death. Souls had to be ferried across by Charon, the boatman, but only if they had a coin to pay for their passage, a coin placed on their eyes after death. The very act of crossing the Styx represents the irreversible journey from life to death, a one-way trip that cannot be avoided. The river Styx is not just a physical crossing, it's a passage into the unknown. But what if you did something so heinous that you were pursued by the relentless vengeance of the gods? That's where the Furies, or Erinyes, come in. These winged women with serpents for hair hunted down those who had committed egregious crimes like murder, perjury, or betrayal. Their very presence was a reminder that there is no escaping justice. The Furies were not just a symbol of punishment. They represented the fear that no wrong would go unpunished, that there is a price to be paid for every sin. Greek mythology wasn't just filled with monsters and gods. It also told tragic, horrifying stories that explored the nature of fate, love, and loss. Take Orpheus and Eurydice, for example. Orpheus, the great musician, descends into the underworld to rescue his wife Eurydice. Hades agrees to release her, but on one condition. Orpheus must not look back at her until they reach the surface. However, in a moment of doubt, he turns around, and in that instant, Eurydice is lost to him forever. The horror of this myth lies in its exploration of irreversible loss. Orpheus's mistake is one that could happen to any of us. When we act out of fear, doubt, or impatience, we may lose everything we hold dear. It's a powerful reminder of the consequences of our actions and the fear that we might never be able to undo a mistake. Or take Tantalus, a king punished for his heinous crimes, forced to stand in a pool of water with fruit dangling just above his head. Tantalus is forever tantalized by desires he can never reach. Every time he bends down to drink, the water recedes. Every time he tries to grasp the fruit, it moves just out of reach. This endless frustration, this eternal torment, reflects the fear of living with desires that are always unattainable, forever unfulfilled. It's the horror of wanting something desperately, only to have it perpetually slip away. And then there's the tragic tale of Narcissus and Echo. Narcissus, entranced by his own reflection, falls in love with it, only to die staring at himself. Echo, a nymph who loves him, is rejected and eventually fades away, leaving only her voice. This myth speaks to the horror of self-obsession, isolation, and unrequited love. A haunting reminder that sometimes the most terrifying thing we can encounter is ourselves. While Roman mythology borrows heavily from Greek mythology, it also introduced some distinctly terrifying concepts, especially when it came to the spirits of the dead. The Romans believed in larvae, the restless ghosts of the dead, and lemures, malevolent spirits that could cause harm to the living. Roman funerary rituals were designed to appease these spirits and ensure that they did not return to haunt the living. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Roman beliefs was the concept of mortal fear, the fear of dying in a state of anger, without a proper burial or cursed by the gods. It was said that if someone died under these conditions, their soul would become one of the larvae, trapped in a restless, vengeful existence. This fear of the dead returning to exact revenge echoes through the ages, influencing countless horror stories that we have seen today. And that is just a glimpse into the terrifying world of Greek and Roman mythology, where gods, monsters, and the dead lurk in every shadow, waiting to strike. These ancient tales may have been born in the past, but their dark, unsettling themes continue to haunt us today, laying the foundation for the horror stories that we know and love. And now our journey begins into the dark heart of Norse mythology, with monstrous beings, creatures so powerful and terrifying they challenge the very existence of gods and mortals alike. Let's start with one of the most iconic creatures in Norse lore, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Jormungandr, the child of the trickster god Loki, is no ordinary snake. This monstrous serpent is said to be so vast that it encircles the entire earth, biting its own tail. Its size is truly unimaginable, its power definitely overwhelming, and it serves as a constant reminder of the apocalyptic fate that awaits us all. In the myth of Ragnarok, the end of the world, Jormungandr will break free from its eternal coil and engage in a cataclysmic battle with Thor, the god of thunder. This battle is said to result in both of their deaths. The Midgard serpent embodies our primal fear of the end, of a world destroyed by forces so great they're beyond our comprehension. Then there's Fenrir, another of Loki's monstrous offspring, a wolf that's destined to bring about the death of Odin, the king of gods. Imagine a creature so fierce and so uncontrollable that even the gods could not restrain it. They bound Fenrir in chains, but prophecy tells us that at Ragnarok, Fenrir will break free and devour Odin. With his fate sealed, just as ours is, in a world governed by fate and uncontrollable forces. This image of an unstoppable, destructive force mirrors the existential horror of a world where chaos reigns and nothing, not even the gods, can stand in its way. But it's not just Jormungandr and Fenrir that haunt the lands of Norse mythology. The trolls and giants of Jotunheim represent the fear of the wild, of untamed nature, far beyond the reach of civilization. These creatures dwell in realms where law and order have no power. They're embodiments of chaos, lurking in places we fear to tread. In the Norse psyche, the wilderness was both a place of wonder and terror, a boundary between human civilization and the primal forces of the cosmos. But what happens when even the gods themselves can't escape the horrors that lurk in the cosmos? Well, that's where Ragnarok comes in, the prophesied twilight of the gods. Ragnarok is the ultimate apocalyptic event in Norse mythology, a time when the gods and their enemies face off in a battle that ends in the destruction of the world. It's a cataclysmic war where death is inevitable, and even the mightiest of gods are slain. The image of a world consumed by fire, chaos, and death strikes at the heart of our greatest fears, the collapse of everything we know and love, and the end of even the divine order. What's terrifying about Ragnarok isn't just the violence, but the inevitability. In Norse mythology, it's not a question of if the gods will fail, but when. The gods themselves are not immortal because they too must face their fate. And at the heart of all this dread is Hel, the goddess of the underworld. Hel is Loki's daughter, and she rules over a cold, bleak realm where those who die without glory, without dying in battle, are sent to. Her kingdom is not a place of peace or rest. It's a realm of loneliness and despair, where the souls of the dead are condemned to wait for eternity. In Hel's domain, there's no hero's welcome, no eternal feasting in Valhalla. For those who die without honor, their afterlife is cold and dark, just an endless void. It's a terrifying vision of death, a fate really worse than death itself, where the soul is lost in an empty, uncelebrated existence. And in a world where even gods cannot escape their fate, the Norns hold the power of destiny itself. These three female deities, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, are the weavers of fate. They spin the thread of life for all beings, gods, and mortals alike. And once the thread is spun, it cannot be undone. The Norns' role in Norse mythology reflects a chilling reality. No one can escape their destiny. The terrifying aspect of fate in Norse thought is that it is inescapable, unchangeable. This is a horror not of monsters or gods, but of our inability to control our own lives. And what's more terrifying than the realization that every action you take, every decision you make, is already written into the fabric of the universe? The Norns remind us that we are all subject to forces beyond our control, and there's nothing we can do to alter the course of our lives. This is the essence of existential horror, the dread of a world where fate is sealed and the choices we think we make are just mere illusions. But then what about the spirits of the dead? In Norse mythology, death is not the end. It's a continuation of the terror. The Valkyries, warrior maidens who serve Odin, take fallen heroes to Valhalla, which is a great hall where they feast and fight until the end of the world. It's a place of honor, but there are also darker spirits, such as the Dragar. Dragar are undead beings who rise from their graves, often in search of vengeance. They haunt burial mounds, prowling in the night in search of the living to terrorize. These revenants are a powerful symbol of the fear that death may not be an end, but just a twisted beginning. Their presence is a stark reminder that the dead have unfinished business, an unsettling thought that really haunts us to this day in such stories about zombies or even vengeful ghosts. At the core of Norse mythology is a battle between chaos and order. The gods continuously fight to preserve a fragile peace against monstrous forces, representing the unrelenting chaos of nature and the cosmos. This battle speaks to our primal fear of the unknown. The universe is vast, unpredictable, and often hostile. In Norse thought, even the gods cannot escape the chaotic forces that threaten to undo everything. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying lesson of all. The ultimate fear is not just death, but the fear of chaos consuming all that we hold dear. The uncontrollable forces of nature, the unknowable fate of the universe, and the inevitable destruction of even the gods are themes that continue to resonate in modern horror. The terror of a world governed by forces beyond our comprehension remains one of the most haunting aspects of Norse mythology. It's a dark and terrifying realm filled with gods and monsters, chaos and fate. It's a world where the end is inevitable, and even the mightiest cannot escape the pull of death. These myths remind us of the fragility of existence, the power of the unknown, and the terror that comes with facing forces beyond our control. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey into the heart of Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology. I hope you found yourself gripped by the same fear that has haunted humanity for centuries. Until next time, remember, the darkness of the unknown is never far away. Stay safe and keep the horrors close. Good night.